Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the Common Communion. My name is Jonathan Brandenburg, and I get to be the pastor at Christ Lutheran Church and School in beautiful Rancho Palos Verdes, California. It's so good to be with you guys today, or tonight, or in the morning, wherever you find yourself listening to this. And I don't know, I'm a pretty reflective mood today, my friends. Just thinking a lot, actually, about what is this all about? What is this life really all about? And I've been thinking about this because, as if you listened to last week, Christ Lutheran celebrated their 100th anniversary, and that's pretty amazing to still be around 100 years later. And actually, their history goes back to 1905 as a little mission church, and then they chartered in 1925. But I think this whole idea of looking back to try to get some clarity and move forward is a pretty common one. And I'm reaching almost 20 years into my own ministry and just seen a lot. And frankly, I'm getting to that point where I go like, what are we doing here? You know, what are we doing here in person? What are we doing here digitally, my friends? What's happening? And I think it's really absolutely appropriate that this week, when I opened up to see what the readings were, for the church has followed this thing called the lectionary for hundreds of years. And it's 3 readings, Old Testament, New Testament, and Gospel reading every Sunday. And this week, the Old Testament, which is this, funny enough, in this time, Easter to Pentecost is a time from Acts, which is in the New Testament, I know, right? But the first reading is from Acts chapter 17, starting with verse 16. And I rarely quote chapter and verse on the Common Communion, but that story, it's a story about a guy named Paul who found himself in a city called Athens. And this story is a story I really picked up on when I used to live in Austin, Texas. And I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. This is around 2010. And I made a big deal that this story that Paul went through in Athens is actually a great template for us to interact with all the changes around us, basically. For me as a younger pastor, especially back then, I was a really younger pastor, I was like, we need to embrace a lot of the changes. We need to embrace a lot of the things that are happening in our world. And it's hard to, though. It's really genuinely hard to. And 16 years later, I can tell you, yeah, it really is hard. And yet the story, as old as it is, hit me in a new way. Or so I really should say a renewed way. Because if you don't know the story, feel free to look it up in Acts 17, but let me give you a little synopsis of it. So Paul, who has his own sort of interesting transformation, dramatic backstory, if you will, Paul is on this missionary journey. And he's actually hanging out with other people going to another place. But he just finds himself there waiting for his friends on a park bench, if you will, in the city of Athens. And he's just looking around while he's waiting, and he sees what the scriptures called tombs, which really are altars, which really are these monuments, miniature monuments to all these gods. That Athens is just full of all these different gods. Most historians agree you're talking about almost 1,000, somewhere around 1,000 monuments, tombs, or altars to these different gods, deities. And Paul is really, the word here that the book of Acts likes to use is like he was provoked. But it really is this whole, it just turned him inside. Like something inside when he was looking around was like, this ain't right. And we don't know what was not right about it. I mean, you could say Paul was a Jew who was a follower of Jesus. And of course, as a monotheistic person, he could just say, that's not right. But there's something else that's going on here with Paul as well. And we don't know what it is. But whatever that was, it made him get up. And he didn't start ripping down idols. He didn't start ripping down these tombs, these altars, these little mini monuments. He didn't start shouting and yelling. He didn't do any of that. Paul started conversations. He went deeper into the market area, basically, of Athens and just started conversations. We have not really any clue what these conversations were about other than he was trying to get across the good news, the gospel of Jesus, that resurrection was a reality, not just sort of a myth that a lot of different religions use, but that the resurrection of Jesus, that the hope of Jesus, the life of Jesus was now ours somehow. And this intrigued just enough people. Later that evening, or maybe a few days later, we're not sure exactly what, but we think it's later in that evening, he ends up in what is known as the Areopagus of Athens. And the Areopagus is basically like a city council, but highly influential, affluent people of Athens, basically. And they have invited him to come and share the good news, the gospel, the testimony about Jesus, especially this resurrection piece. And I find that amazing. And while he's there, Paul doesn't hesitate to point to one of the idols, point to one of the altars, the monuments, the tombs, and a specific one that said, the tomb to the unknown God. That the people of Athens were so prodigious with their inclusion of all the different deities out there, they wanted to make sure there was even one to the one they didn't know. And again, Paul didn't totally, rag on the other tombs or monuments, altars. He just points to this one. And he says, what you worship in unknown, in mystery, now let me tell you. Let me make it known to you. And he quotes a poet, and he kind of quotes part of Job, the book of Job. If you've ever read the book of Job, it's like one of the most unquotable books, but it's sort of a riff off the book of Job. He kind of gives, for me, shortest but best speech about Jesus ever. Because he basically says, guys, this is what I tell you. That we know that God makes up all this. The nature that swirls around me, the ocean, everything that lives and moves and has its being is because of this thing, what we call God. And it's beautiful. And even more, and this is where he quotes their own poets, of the way we were created, the way we have our inmost being, that thing we like to call soul or spirit, personality. It's so tied up with this idea of divine, so tied up with this idea of other. And he says, this is what I want to tell you. I want to tell you this other, this God that we know somehow we're connected to. This is God. And he talks about Jesus. And that has to be one of the weirdest moments, because and I don't even think for the Areopagus, I don't even think for the original hearers, because they're used to the idea of humanity and gods having interaction with each other. They're sort of used to this concept of God showing up looking like or acting like a human. But what Paul's actually saying here is that Jesus isn't just showing up and acting like a human, but that Jesus is showing up and being God. That Jesus is showing up and being God and still being fully human. And I don't know how he ultimately shared that, my friends, but he did. And I think it's brilliant. And I wish I could have like the full transcript of his speech, because so much of what we see around us has to be like Paul in Athens. I hear it time in and time out, and maybe you're different, and that's totally okay. But what I hear as a pastor so many times of like, what has happened to the world? What's gone wrong with the world? That somehow at one point the world was actually okay or right, and now it's really gone wrong. And I think some of the more reflective ones are like, well, it was always kind of messed up. It seems more obvious that it's messed up right now, or it seems more like people don't like other people more this season or whatever. And I find that fascinating, because I don't know. I mean, everybody has their perspective, and yet there is something happening that whether you go to church, whether you believe in Jesus, any of that, you don't have to do any of that to kind of look around and go, wow, this is kind of a crazy season. This is kind of a rough go. And I think there's a real and present temptation to hide, to absolutely hide, to just be done with it, frankly, because it's so hard. It's so hard to interact. It's so hard to walk with the other, the whoever, even friends and family. It's really hard to walk with them. And yet what I think Paul is trying to do here, and I don't think he had any understanding that he was like setting a template for you and I, but he was. He's trying to say, you can be mad. You can get provoked. You can have, inside of you like messed up. Like you can look around and go like, it just messes me up inside. Have that. It's okay to have that. It's okay to wrestle with what you are seeing around you. Whatever your mini monuments are, whatever your altars, tombs are, whatever that just gets under your skin, your space, and says, what's wrong with the world that we have this? Or what's wrong with us that we have this? Or what's wrong with my city or my community? What's wrong with my school? What's wrong with my family? What's wrong with my friends? Whatever it is, and you look around and go, my goodness, what is going on? And you just want to hide away. And yet, what I think Paul is trying to invite us into, what I think the Bible, the scriptures are trying to invite us into, with a lot of grace, by the way, with a lot of compassion, a lot of grace, is this whole idea of just start conversations. Just start talking, engaging. See what happens. It's the easiest and safest way is just to hide away. Get that. And many times we got to do that. Frankly, many times I do that. But there's other times when you're like, no. I need to talk. I need to talk with that which actually provokes me. This is the very people that are provoking Paul. They built the altars. It wasn't somebody else that built the altars. They built the altars. They built the tombs. They built the mini monuments. Nobody else. Made up people. And just stopping and go like, I need to talk to the very thing that is provoking me. I need to hear them, see them. I need to sojourn with them. I need to buy them a boba tea or something. Like I need this moment that Paul took as well. To just talk, to engage. And then from there, see what happens. Now, not every conversation by any stretch of the imagination, my friends, Is it going to lead to you getting an audience to be able to maybe change that which is going wrong, or you think is going wrong, right? That's not the point. The whole point wasn't for Paul. Paul wasn't angling to get to the Areopagus. I do not believe that for 1 second. Paul was just angling to understand. Paul was angling to get a space to be able to share a story that he believed is life-changing. And I think that is as basic as it becomes, is get to a point with people where they know you actually see them, that you actually care about them. You don't have to be their best friends, but you say, I actually have sought to understand why these things happen, or whatever it is, right? And then they will give you don't have to ask for it, they will give you permission to share what you believe is life-changing, what you believe you're passionate about and is worthy of sharing. And that's the moment. It doesn't have to be at the high Areopagus, city council level of some sort of high political landscape level or social landscape level. It can be just as simple as a one-on-one. And then you get to share what you believe is the most important. You get to share a gospel, a good news, a resurrection, a hope, a grace, a love from Jesus. And yet, maybe you do it through poetry. I mean, maybe you do it by pointing to the very thing of I see that you're passionate about this. And while Paul disagrees, obviously Paul disagrees with idolatry and having 1,000 tombs, many monuments, right? He still uses it as the object lesson to say, this is a good starting point. And I love that. The very thing that provoked him, the very thing that was these people, is also the very thing he's going to start with going, you know what? I see you're very religious people. I see that you're very spiritual people. And I don't think he meant it. Maybe he meant it tongue-in-cheek. Maybe he meant it sarcastically, but I don't think so. And then he goes and he shares and I love that. And so for me, as I reflect on so much of what life is happening right now, my friends, and the idea of what are we supposed to do is of people who are following after Jesus, we are given lots of grace. Let's get very clear about that and very real about that. We are given lots of grace. And so many times when we look around and we get provoked, we forget that grace immediately. Well, how dare they? Well, no, how dare I? How dare I? So I think Paul is so close to that. He is so near to his very sharp understanding that he does not deserve grace. He does not deserve the love of God, and yet he has it completely. And that's what leads him on this Acts 17 journey into Athens. And I think that's where we start. We start with grace. We start with, I didn't deserve this grace. I didn't deserve what I've been given. I certainly did not deserve anything around me. I just was given it. And from that, then I go, and that which provokes me, I go, maybe I should understand it better. Maybe I should interact with it more and see where it goes. And maybe I get to share some gospel, some good news, and maybe I don't. But I stopped. I showed the same grace that I was given, even for that which provoked me. And I wanted to understand. And from understanding, I'm hoping I got to share the gospel. Even if I didn't get to share it in words, maybe my mere presence there shared it. And so that's what it's all about. In many ways, guys, that's what it's all about, is allowing yourself to show up for the moment of grace. Allowing yourself to show up, not just be provoked, but then be impassioned to show up, to be presence. And more people than I can count have done it for me and done it for my situation. And so I am praying that those who are interested in following Jesus through grace can hear the same message. And so, my friends, that's what I'm praying for all of us, is that whatever provokes us, whatever gets under our skin, turns us on the inside, that which is what will also then take time and get to know and get to understand. Why does it provoke us? Why does it get under our skin? Who are the people behind it? Who are the beating hearts, thinking minds? Those that have been fearfully and wonderfully made by God even. Provoke us, absolutely. But also inspire us to understand more. To take a moment to create space for real sharing so that also we can share the good news of Jesus. I pray for those spaces, even when we're provoked. And I pray that we don't just shut down, but that we go out and that we boldly take that moment of grace and compassion and get to know people, get to know those things that provoke us, and just watch what grace may do in those conversations. Amen. All right, my friends, thank you so much for letting me share today, and thanks for joining us for another Common Communion. All right, we're going to keep going on. If you have any thoughts of what you would love to see from Common Communion, don't ever hesitate to leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you personally. But for now, my friends, stay safe, stay sane out there, my friends, and keep sharing, keep taking time to understand each other, and know that grace is going to work within that, my friends. All right, but for now, we'll see you later, my friends, and I'll see you next time on The Common Communion. Bye, y'all.